Hey everyone, Liana here, playing more Dead Kings. I'm kind of hooked on this DLC. There's a little kid in it, and that's usually cloying, but it kind of works because Arno's all mad in this. He wants to get out of France. But I don't know if you guys have seen the, I won't even call it an interview, it was theater, with Rock, Paper, Shotgun and Peter Molyneux. And the reason I say it's not an interview, it's theater, because of the way the interview started off. Basically, it starts off with the interviewer asking Peter Molyneux, are you a pathological liar? And the problem with that question is, yeah, how do you answer that well? You know, are you a pathological liar? Well, a pathological liar is gonna say no. And an honest person's gonna say no. So there's no winning. The question in itself is an accusation that's almost impossible to defend yourself against. Now, I won't claim to be the biggest Peter Molyneux fan. I used to love Fable. Loved it. Fable 1 and 2, awesome. But then something happened. I don't know what happened, but it's really unprofessional as a journalist to stab someone in the back. You like what I did there? By starting an interview that way. Oh, I'm so clever. But if you're looking to get a productive interview as a journalist, if you're looking for someone to open up to you and give you some interesting stuff, you don't put them on their guard that way. You're only doing that when it's not an interview, it's theater. You're trying to make some sort of reputation off the back of a death. And they could completely deserve that. The frustration could be completely legitimate on behalf of the interviewer, John something, but it's a mistake. It's a mistake because if someone's on their guard, they're not going to tell you as much. And so I also think it's funny that any game journalist right now would be going at anyone that hard. I know I sure wouldn't, because I'm asking the public to ease off and be understanding. So I'm going to set the tone that way. I found it very strange. Now, whatever you think of Goddess and the whole Kickstarter thing, that's a different thing. There's been a lot of stuff on Twitter and a lot of people with a lot of opinions about it. I'm trying to be objective about the process and say that as entertaining as starting an interview off with, are you a pathological liar, it's actually a mistake in interviewing. And I say this as somebody who's done both. I've done like legit, straight up, actual journalistic interviews, and then I've done comedy segments where they're goofier like that. So I know the difference. I've done both. They're both viable. I just caution anybody regarding thinking that's actual journalism. It's not. It's theater. That being said, the whole thing brings up the interesting problem with Kickstarter. Kickstarter as a medium for fundraising. And the reality is, as frustrating as it is, what Molyneux says about Kickstarter and, asking for the amount of money you think you need, and it ends up not being the amount of money you actually need. Unfortunately, too often that's true, and that's my big concern about Kickstarter. And I've been watching this very carefully because, I've had a series of articles that were very, very well received. Thank you guys, thank you for your support, but people are going, do a series, do a Kickstarter. And I'm like, all right, I've never done a Kickstarter before. I've had colleagues do Kickstarters, and I've watched it, but they're not the same thing. They've been kickstarting games, I was watching the Kickstarter, the successful Kickstarter for The Long Dark very closely. The game's awesome. The sandbox alpha I played was fantastic. Come on. You know, I've received a lot of advice on Kickstarter, and the thing I found really disturbing about the whole thing is a piece of advice I've gotten is start low. Ask for not a lot of money. If you're wondering what weapon I'm using, by the way, it's a new one for the DLC. It's like a blunder. It's like a mortar gun with an axe on the end, a bayonet gun, I think it's called. I don't know. It's awesome. It's a completely stupid weapon, and I love it. You know, one of the pieces of advice I've gotten is ask for little money and let it grow. And that made me very, very uncomfortable. And this is what makes me uncomfortable with Kickstarter as a method of funding, is that Kickstarter is not an auction. Kickstarter is supposed to be asking the public for the money you think you need to complete the project. It's not a let's see how much we can get. Kickstarter is supposed to be essentially a contract with your backers who are not getting profit participation in the finished product. That's the thing about Kickstarter, is people are giving money and expecting nothing but the product in return. So this idea that you deliberately ask low to try to get momentum, that's a very risky proposition. That's not playing straight. That's not being honest with the consumer, and that's wrong. But people do it because it's a tactic, right? These sorts of crowdfunding things, they're not business plans anymore. They're politics. They're political campaigns. And that's what I don't like about it. That's what makes me very uncomfortable in getting into this world. But to make the stuff I want to make, I don't really have a choice. But I don't believe that Molyneux deliberately undercut the project. I think what happened is what happens to so many video games, or so I've heard talking to numerous developers. Things go over budget, things cost more, things take longer than you initially expect. So as much as they may have been, you know, very earnest in how much they thought it was going to cost, every game's an experiment, and you really don't know. Now, is that an excuse for not eyeballing it properly? No, it's not an excuse for not eyeballing it properly. It was a mistake. But a mistake is not a lie. And I find it so curious that Rock, Paper, Shotgun of all services would be so quick to accuse someone of lying, continuing what's been going on in the last 6 months, where they themselves have been accused of dirty dealings when they were probably honest mistakes or errors in judgment. And this is where I start going, all right, I really understand why the public is upset with these things. And I'm seeing other people in the press heavily criticizing the article. I'm seeing other people praising it or saying, yeah, that's classic Molyneux. It doesn't matter how much of an asshole a guy is. If you secure an interview, you treat them with respect. No matter how big an asshole you think they are, you let them hang themselves. You don't go in with guns blazing. The first rule I always tell myself when I'm doing an interview, that's an interview and not an entertainment piece, is it's not about you. I don't even like being on camera in developer interviews. A lot of people like putting me on camera because, look, woman in gaming. So they like to put me on camera, where if I was a guy, I'd probably be off camera. But that's an aside. The point is, I always tell myself when I'm preparing for these things, this isn't about you. This is about getting the most out of a subject, letting them talk. And that's the difference between an interviewer and a good interviewer, and somebody who gets somebody so comfortable that they slip up and say something they weren't supposed to. That's a great interviewer. And that's what you don't get when you start off by calling somebody a pathological liar. And well, he didn't call him a pathological liar. He asked, let's face it, the implication was very clear. I think it was inappropriate, not because of any morality, just because it's an interview mistake. I think I've repeated that enough, but I really want to hammer the point home, because people have a bad habit of reading what they want me to say into what I'm actually saying, because, you know, people have already cast me as a hero and or villain in whatever passion play they've, I was pressing the wrong button, so my parrying is, there we go. You know, and they've cast me as a hero or villain in whatever morality play they're you know, engaged in, invested in, and their interpretation of the things I say and the things I write varies accordingly, and that drives me crazy. And that's why it's so important to me that when I'm looking at something, I'm looking at what someone actually said. I try my damn best not to let my presuppositions about a person cloud my ability to actually read what they said or wrote. And I don't think it's appropriate to start an interview with anybody that way. Now, other people are going to disagree with me. Other people have different interview styles. But that's my take on it. And I think it's important to discuss these things and examine these things because the public's asked for it. The public is concerned about the way games press work and philosophies and theories of games journalism. Because, and while I'm not willing to go so far as to say games journalism is inherently special, it is different. It's different from, say, politics or something like that, in that politics, you do go hard on certain politicians because, and even then you don't start off that way. But it's fair to question more about the personal dealings of a politician because their judgment is so critical. They're making laws, right? It's reasonable to assume that their decisions are going to affect us. A game developer does not make laws. So there's less of a burden for them to be perfect human beings. That doesn't mean that nothing matters. It just means that it's important to keep in mind that when we're covering games, we're not curing cancer, and we're not, you know, liberating a country or something like that. We're writing about video games. And people are reading games because they like games, because games are fun. As much as people say they want hard-hitting content, I haven't found that to be true in the grand, not true. I haven't found that to be consistent. See, I'm very careful about what words I pick. Because at the end of the day, yes, people want to feel like they're being dealt with straight. But they don't want stuff that's going to consistently take away from the idea that games are fun. And that's the unique tightrope that that's the unique tightrope that you have to walk as a games writer. Is that you have to give people interesting content, you have to give people challenging content, you have to give people honest content, but you can't take it to the point that it stops, that it impedes the enjoyment of the play process, the gaming process for gamers. And that, as we've learned over the last few months, is a lot harder than it sounds. It is instinct, it is experience. Also eat the flesh of my people. Oh, fantastic. Cannibalism. You know, it's knowing where to draw these fairly arbitrary, fairly subjective lines in journalism, opinion writing, and you know, criticism, games criticism, or critique is difficult, and it is experience, and it's learning from the right people and constantly being honest with yourself. And that's hard. It gets tiring sometimes because you're constantly questioning it, and you're going to be wrong. You're going to be wrong. I mean, I strive to push theories. I strive to examine things that I don't quite know. And so I really find it interesting when people are like, well, I didn't agree with everything, but... Well, I don't assume someone's going to agree with everything. My job is to make you think. My job is not necessarily to... Yes, my job is to persuade, but it isn't to control your minds. It's to engage your minds. And those are normally different things. Yeah, I'm you know, presenting my ideas right now. But the amazing thing about gaming is so much of the theory, so much of the philosophy is so new and such a work in progress that it's constantly evolving. And that's what I love about it. But that means, you know, we're going to be wrong a lot, or we're not going to be right for long. And I think that's cool. I mean, the fact that what's possible changes every 6 months, that's amazing to me. But it's also humbling because, you know, somebody's constantly going to have a better idea. Someone's constantly going to have a different way of doing things, a more efficient way of doing things, and you have to be constantly open to learning. And I think what happens with a guy like Molyneux, who's been in it for so long, is he starts losing touch with that process, and I won't say that entirely because there are some people that have stayed sharp for years and years and years. But, you know, let's face it, there are some people who were like, oh, I died. Well, that's ironic because I'm poking sacred cows. But there are some people who were great 5-10 years ago. And then somewhere along the line got not so great, and you get to see the incredibly long load screens that still exist in Assassin's Creed Unity. This is my one major complaint about this game, is the load screens. They're so long. But that wasn't too bad, actually. But, you know, everybody has their time. I mean, as much as everybody loves Miyamoto isn't Miyamoto anymore, you know? And when a company ends up being the direction of one man, it gets stale. And, you know, Nintendo was like that for a while, and then, Journal. Okay. Okay, Skin of the Sun King, rat meat nasty.
This book is bound in human skin.
Bound in human skin. Awesome. Okay. This isn't a plot that's in a million video games. Where are we going? Am I supposed to go there? What is this? Oh, there. Okay. You know, and this is the thing where you have to sort of be kind to these elder statesmen that helped build the industry, and maybe they're not quite, you know, the Wunderkind anymore. That they did contribute, and just because, you know, they're not making things that are relevant to us anymore doesn't mean they don't deserve respect for what they did. Because nobody can be a kid forever, right? And I think there's something to learn there's a lot to learn from these guys that have been around forever, but it's, why can't I go through that door? Well, that's extremely weird. What? Well, oh, I couldn't see the door for the haze. There's actually a door there. Right, okay. Hey. Okay, in the window. Shit. What target? What am I doing? I'm not paying attention because I'm talking to you guys. See? Why can't I do this anymore? There's a trick to this. Whoop! There you go. You have to touch no buttons for that to work. You know, I think that we just need a bit more gentleness overall in the video game industry. I know that sounds crazy because gamers are hardcore and all that stuff. Come on. You know, the reality is that we're old enough now that we do have people that, you know, are retiring and, oh, I gotta tail them, okay. And who aren't what they once were. They're not, you know, as energetic, they're not as perhaps innovative in the same way. We still have to show them respect for their previous accomplishments and not do things like call them a pathological liar. And I think even for people starting out,
how's the loot?
what?
Have you found anything?
Loot down below.
Been claimed. Golden era is past.
What do these things mean?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
I heard you chasing
Innuendo.
other things in gold.
I don't know what you mean.
Huh.
Pardon me, there's a man following us.
Oh, Arno, you're a bad tailor. Oh, you fail as an assassin. What the hell is that? He's a master assassin, he can't tail some loser? Interesting. Okay, maybe this is just to make things more fighty. But yeah, I don't know. I think that if we're gonna be taken seriously as a, not community is such a lame word, as an industry, you know, the business industry has the business press, you know, the books have book reviewers and films have film reviewers. If we want to start being treated seriously, we need to start treating ourselves seriously, start treating ourselves with the respect we want from others. And I think that's part of what's going on in gaming right now, is that gaming is suffering from a profound lack of self-respect. And so certain industry leaders allow the mainstream press, even encourage the mainstream press to make us out to be losers and monsters. And that's always felt like a profound lack of you know, self-respect for the industry. And it drives me crazy, because we know we're not. I mean, these people that are so convinced that gaming is this wretched hive of scum and villainy, Star Wars crew, what does it say about them? What does it say about what's in their hearts and minds? And let's find out. Oh, that was interesting. I'm spazzy as hell today. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. I found out that's bad in England. Saying spazzing or spazzy. It just means freaking out here. It means something very different in England. So I have to take that word out of my vocabulary. Sorry, British viewers. But I'm going to sign off now. That was longer and less coherent than I thought it would be. This is the downside of playing video games while talking. It's hard to completely focus on one or the other. What is this? Bible. Paris, change rooms, fancy, fine covers, serve to do. Are they? Okay. Soylent Green is people! It's people! Anyway, I'm gonna sign off. Have a great weekend, guys. All the best. Keep on gaming. And there will be a thing I will do eventually that's a follow-up to the Metal Eater articles. Because I think that I want to call it postmortem, because that sounds, you know, that sounds like, oh, ominous. But I think sort of a recap, that's a good word. A recap's in order, because it touched a lot of people, and I'm humbled, and I'm honored, and it's great. It's great to see people going, yes, we like this, because now I know, okay, I know which way to point. I know which way to go. Instead of just knowing all these places not to go, I know a way to go. And this makes me happy. So on that note,